Oh, there it says recording started. Look at this.
That sounds right.
Crazy. All right. Well, initially what started out is me just trying to figure out how to use this website for my upcoming Andrew Piper interview, which I know you have good chuckles about my Piperdom.
I've never heard of him. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll do a quick chat here. I might as well. Thank you for coming, Mr. David Sodergren, author of, what is it, 5 books now?
I think it's 6.
6, Forgotten
Island, Night Shoot. Actually, if you know them, come on.
Yeah, Dead Girls Blues.
Yep.
Perfect Victim, and then Navajo.
Maggie's Grave.
Oh, Maggie, yes. How did I forget Maggie's Grave? That's right.
Come on.
That is 6 or 5.5. If we're doing the co-author bit. And for those of you who don't know, we wrote Navajo Nightmare together. The opening of it apparently is fantastic. The second half, the reviews have been mixed.
2.5 stars. Sorry.
I showed that to my wife, and she had a good chuckle. I should have probably prepared some questions. So
I was assuming that you had.
Tell me about yourself. What are you currently working on?
Where's Boris when you need him? I'm a Scottish horror author who has written 6 books that we've just gone through. And I'm currently working on several. I've got one that's actually completely finished that you have read, of course, Steve.
That would be the biker burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to edit either, so
that's fine. There are bikers in it, yeah. That is completely finished, and it's actually on my shelf. Just waiting for the right time to put it out. And then I've got one that is halfway through, and I've got one that I just started today because even though I'm halfway through the other one, I just had a great idea and I couldn't help myself. And then I have teased that Forgotten Island 2 is going to be coming out next year, but I think I did that a little prematurely because I still have a couple of other books to write before then.
I've been down that road.
Yeah, I just get excited sometimes. I'm like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? Part 2 is outlined. I just don't know how.
Well, look at how far out we had even teased Navajo.
Yes, we started.
That was in the back of Night Shoot, wasn't it?
It was in the back of Night Shoot. It was trailed as my next 2 books were Dead Girl Blues and Navajo Nightmare, and that came out in May 2019.
Yeah, so 2 years later.
Because it came out in May, didn't it? So it was exactly 2 years. And then, ironically, of course, it only took us about a few months to actually write. So,
and it's funny because I have so many things that I'm on the go, and then in the back of my mind, I know we've roughly kind of briefly talked about a possible follow up, and then every once in a while, I get this little kernel in there, and I'm like, I wonder if that would work for it. And then by the time I get home, I'm like, we'll wait. So at some point, that light bulb will flick on for our big idea for what we should do for a sequel / follow up, whether it's a full sequel or not. But
I think the ideas that we've spoken about are really exciting. Really, really like the direction that it's potentially heading in. So
eventually, maybe next year we'll have some other crazy pandemic hit, and then
another lockdown.
Maybe we'll need to move to New Zealand. And then we'll just be we'll have a government who knows what to do, and B, we'll be in lockdown and we can just write.
So my dog is staring at me and whining. I'll be 1 second. This is super professional. Come here. Come and sit with us. Oh, here he is. Here's Boris, which is the only reason anyone will be watching this is because they want to catch up to this weirdo.
And plus, he has wrote 6 books that you've taken credit for.
That's right. He's on the cover of all of them. He's in all of them. Even in Navajo Nightmare, I managed to fit a pug cameo into that somehow. So my research for whether they had pugs in the Wild West was inconclusive. Let's say that.
That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah,
Inconclusive works for everything.
yeah. I did research. Chose to ignore it.
How is Boris doing?
He's all right. He was very poorly recently. Injured himself by just getting too excited and running around too much and hurt his back. Oops, stay still, buddy. But he's on the mend now. We've had to buy him steps so he can get up onto the chair and steps up onto the bed. But he's getting a lot more lively now. He's doing his parkour again and jumping from chair to chair. So
when OJ had hurt his back, we had bought him stairs too, and he never used them to go up. He only would use them to come down. So it's like he couldn't jump onto the bed, so we'd have to like heft his massive body up there, and then he'd use them to come down, and we'd be like, come on, man, use them to go up too. Like seriously, like you're 100 pounds. Like come on. Yeah.
See, Boris will use them to go up, but we have to constantly remind him not to jump down because that's how he hurts himself. You're a silly man. You're a silly wee man.
So let's.
Yes. What's your next prepared question? Come on.
Yeah. I'm just checking my notes here. So let's go back to the start. Let's go back to the start, shall we? To the Forgotten Island.
Yes.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Inspired by a trip that you took to Thailand.
That's right, my honeymoon, no less.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. How long would you say from that trip to kind of deciding like I'm going to write a novel? Because you before that you were more just watching movies, kind of doing movie reviews and stuff, and showcasing paperbacks and stuff like that. But you weren't at all really putting out short stories or anything like that.
Not at the time, no. I had as a child, I always wrote stories, and I used to sort of pretend to write sequels. Not pretend to. I used to write sequels to my favorite horror films at the time. But the first full proper try at writing a novel as an adult, it's interesting. I had written a full novel before that. I think I did it in NaNoWriMo.
Oh yeah, the November.
Write a novel in in a month thing. The year before, it's would have been 2016. I must have done that. Is that right? My concept of time is loose at best. I think that would have been 2016, and then we got married in 2017. Went on the honeymoon. And that's when I would have written The Forgotten Island over the next year, because it came out in September 2018, which is, so a month tomorrow it'll be 3 years since Forgotten Island came out. I'd written that first novel, which will see the light of day at some point, but in a tremendously heavily rewritten version. I think I've actually cherry-picked. There was loads of good ideas in it, and I've sort of stolen them for each subsequent book. Every book has something that I've taken from that very first one, so it's now just completely useless. But the idea behind it and the setting and the horror in it is pretty cool. So that will come out at some point, after all the other ones. Yeah. But yes, I'd written that. It was fine for a first ever attempt at a novel. But Thailand, that was where it was very inspiring. Also, I was on my honeymoon. I was very happy. It was lovely, and just lots of things that I saw there. We were on a boat, going past this deserted island, and on the top of it there was a ruined hotel structure, like a half-finished thing. And I thought, that's cool. And then that night, I think it was the exact same night, we went to have dinner, and underneath the big umbrella above our heads was a giant spider just lurking above my wife's head, and we panicked and ran away, and the people there all laughed at us, but then they were scared of it as well. It was huge. And I think it was just those two things that sort of coalesced together and inspired me to write that one. that was my first real attempt to finish and edit and rewrite and things. I think the opening chapter of that book, I think I have about 15 different drafts of. They were all similar but slightly different.
Yeah. Now, like, just from us messaging over the years, you typically are pretty in depth in some of the back research and set location stuff like that. So did you ever take the time to go back and try to find out like what the story of that hotel was in real life?
No.
No. Yeah.
I think of myself as being really the exact opposite. I think I'm very not in depth at all. What I did with that was I watched lots and lots of sort of urban exploration videos.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of these. I mean, generally, if you look into the actual backstory of these abandoned hotels and things, it's usually something rather prosaic, like they ran out of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a hurricane or something like that.
Yeah.
But they're these urban, is it urbex they call it? These urban exploration videos are just super cool because it's.
Yeah, I love watching that stuff.
Yeah.
It's very neat, and I like every time I watch it, I'm like, well, why is none of this stuff around me? Like, they'll go to like abandoned insane asylums, and then the next week they're at like an old nuclear plant, and you're just like I just have like rundown hotels. Like, come on, like.
I see. We've got quite a lot of good stuff. I'm in Edinburgh, and nearby there is
a volcano. You live at a volcano.
Yes. There's an extinct volcano, very, very, very close. A matter of minutes away from me, to be honest. There is an abandoned insane asylum. In fact, there's an abandoned hospital nearby, an abandoned insane asylum, which isn't just the asylum. It's got all the different buildings and houses around it are all also abandoned.
And sorry, correct me. Your volcano, it also has a castle on it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, jeez. Sorry. So you overlooked that. Some people. I know that's just like
castles are a dime a dozen in Scotland. You can't swing a puck without hitting a castle.
Now, for the Forgotten Island, you had Trevor Henderson do the cover for that.
Absolutely.
And you know how much I'm a fan of Trevor's, not near as much as my son is. But how did you two hook up for that?
I joined Twitter, and I didn't really know how to go about finding artists. And generally, I find cover art today, it's particularly in trad press stuff. It's just really bland and boring, and designed to fit comfortably on a supermarket shelf. To be honest, quite a lot of indie horror seems to be going that way a bit as well. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the new artwork coming out.
Remember, I can't edit anything out, so
that's fine.
No names, no titles.
No names. So yeah, I specifically wanted some an original piece of art created, quite a striking image, and so I was just going through Twitter and looking at artists, people who are more on the horror side of things, and I happened across Trevor. Now I'm trying to think what one it was.
That was pre Siren Head too, wouldn't it?
It was pre Siren Head. I think it was around the time he was doing it was like a sort of found footage thing. So he would get real photographs and then record signs and make it look like CCTV, and then put a sinister image on top of that. I think it was around that time, or maybe slightly before.
Yeah.
But his stuff just really stood out to me, and at the time, he had a following, a decent following. But it was before he completely blew up with Siren Head and all his subsequent monsters. He's just so talented, and it's the kind of guy who, in fact, all the artists I've worked with, where I can give them my basic idea, and they will completely transform it into something much better that I couldn't possibly have done myself.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things too, is like your books always have had, kind of that really striking, not so much a tied-in cover from, Forgotten Island to Night Shoot, but when you see it, it's your book, right? So, and then next up came Night Shoot, which was kind of almost your ode to cinema and gore and
Yeah, they're all odes to gore.
yeah.
That was.
Yeah, what do you remember about writing that one?
Well, that was based on a true story. In that I was a film student, and parts of that I took a lot from actually making films in university, which is a dreary, miserable affair. The boredom, incredible boredom of hanging around film sets and waiting for something to happen. But also in these really cool locations. The location for Night Shoot, Crawford Manor, is actually based on the one where we filmed our fourth year final film called The Red Doll. But I can't remember where we filmed it. I really want to go and look at it again, but I have no idea where I filmed it. I don't know if I'm in contact with anyone that was in the group. Anyway, the film wasn't very good, but Night Shoot was good. That was my homage to 80s slashers, and also at the time, I think I started writing it around the time of the whole Me Too Hollywood movement with that scumbag Weinstein and things like that. Yeah. So I was trying to use the sort of world of student filmmaking as a microcosm for what was happening in the bigger world with the sort of sexual exploitation of women and things like that.
Yeah, and then that one was, I would say, a pretty big, not a leap, but very different content from the Forgotten Island, with it being that we're trapped, we're trying to survive from this crazy thing that's coming up from beneath us, to we're in this location trying to do this film, and at the same time they're getting kind of picked off one by one.
I've always been a fan of any sort of horror story that takes place, in fact any story really, that just takes place over one night, just one long night of horror. I think it's much more effective as well, especially when writing. If you're writing a story and it's spread out over several days or weeks, it's really hard to maintain the sort of forward momentum, keep the story moving along quite smoothly. Whereas if you've just got one long night of terror, that's always much more effective for me.
So then from Night Shoot, next up you delivered the brutal gore, common theme, with Dead Girls Blues. I remember, I think that was the first one that I kind of pre-read / we'll call it beta read officially for you, which was one of those honors that I don't speak about enough, because you'll just send me some weird Twitter message after. But I was like, well, finally, I've made it. I'm in the inner circle. And I remember that one was kind of like, initially you had told me it's like, well, it's more about there's this room and there's these like old tapes and stuff. And I was like, okay, like, this is going to be kind of like his take on snuff films. But I think it was way more than just that little snippet. Again, kind of that survival tale of, who's responsible and how do I survive and make it through this.
And that one is the hardest book I've written by far, partly because it takes place over a number of days, possibly weeks. And it's really hard to keep that going. Also, that book there's three completely different versions written from basically start to finish of it. There was one version which was much more psychological. There was one version which was, well, it just went off a completely different direction in the second part. And I basically took the two of those and smooshed them together to create a third version, and then had to work on that third version to make that actually work. And that was a really difficult book to write, also because the subject matter was just horrible. I was actually researching.
All of the scenes at the strip club must have been awful to research.
I was thinking more of the snuff stuff, but yeah.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so you can remember to see which parts I stored up here from.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And of your books, that one has kind of the most not stark but bold cover, going the bright yellow and the black and red kind of trim on it. I remember you had mentioned one time before that you weren't sure if that kind of threw people off with it being so bright, but the story being so dark. Like, do you still find that?
It's my least it's my lowest selling book. Let's say that, and I think the cover does play a little part into it, which is a shame because it's my favorite of the covers because it's the one where we absolutely exactly nailed the aesthetic I was going for, which was, and that's thanks to my wife, who was doing my graphic design at that point, and Connor Leslie, who'd painted the cover. I know that people have told me that they specifically haven't bought that book because they like all the spines to match and they like all the covers to match. And part of me is like, well, maybe I should just release a limited edition one with the black spine. But also, nah, I don't fucking want it. Oh, can I swear?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, this isn't on. I'll edit that out.
You can't get a Scottish person on and ask them not to swear. Good grief.
It's funny because it's weird how, and our mutual pal, Gavin, who will probably watch this at one point, he's so on, all the spines have to match. And I don't know how many times we've seen him tweet out the 3 Clive Barker books, but it's funny because
you're never going to get those new Stephen King ones. Just give up, man. Just give up.
When I look at the books I've released, The Stranger is completely white, and to me, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's right. I put out this book and the spine's white and everything, and it kind of stands out. So to me, at least, as in my brain, when I hear that, I'm like, really, to me, it's more about getting the author than, he has a yellow spine and the rest are black, so it's weird because specifically, I know I've seen one comment from somebody on Goodreads who had said they were iffy about getting Dead Girl because of the yellow, but then they raved about Navajo and they posted photos about Navajo. So it's kind of like, now the spine of Navajo is red, so.
I mean, I get it because some people love that uniformity, and that's totally understandable. I personally don't care. I do like the sort of way you can identify, one of my books generally by just seeing that the square with the image in the middle of it. And I think Dead Girl Blues has that exact aesthetic as well because it's got the stark color with the shape. It's a circle in this instance. I don't know.
Well, I mean, on the spine,
maybe people aren't interested in the book. I don't know. Maybe it's not the cover.
Maybe that's what they're saying to be nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, on the spine, you have the Boris pug logo, right? So
absolutely, that's very important. Yeah.
So then after that was the book that I forgot was Maggie's Grave.
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember initially you had messaged me about having this crazy idea about where this witch had been kind of murdered near where you live, and you're gonna bust out this surprise novella and get it out. And then I think it ended up being another year or so before you actually ended up getting it out because you decided to expand it. Do you remember that?
No. I have absolutely no recollection of that whatsoever. But it does sound like the sort of thing I'd say.
That's what happened.
Wow, so I was planning that as a sort of novella quickie.
Yeah, because you were cool. I'm just gonna pop it out there for Halloween and
yeah, you know what? That makes total sense because I wrote there's a full version of that written, and it was about half the pages because it had absolutely nothing to do with, hey, come on. It was just the kids went up, awoke Maggie, and it didn't have any of the side story with her friend and the policeman and the ritual and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that makes sense. And I remember sitting by a pool in Tenerife with that, just in baking hot sun, beautiful. And I had my wee notebook, and I completely redid the whole of Maggie's grave, sitting by that pool. Oh, that was a great pool. Oh, getting wistful for traveling. Yes, Maggie's grave, of course, is based on a true story again, in that the actual Maggie's grave does exist in a little town near Perthshire called Dunning. Funnily enough, just before we started this interview, Michelle's Melancholia on Instagram just tagged me in a reel where she'd visited Maggie's grave.
Oh, crazy. I'll check that out after. That's cool.
Oh, it's totally awesome. Yeah, she brought the book with her, which I've not done yet because it's a wee bit of a drive away, and there's not really much else there. You just drive for an hour and a half, visit the grave, which is just by the side of the road, not up a mountain, and then you just go home.
She's a reader with the book. I think if the author goes with the book, you actually open the portal, and she does come back. So,
wow. It's not as if it can get any worse at the moment, is it? So let's get Maggie.
There was the senior. The end at the seniors' home suggests things might not go as well as we want them to if she returns.
At the what film? Sorry,
the scene at the end of Maggie's grave at the seniors' home there, or the evening party, we'll call it.
Yes, the soiree.
That suggests maybe we don't want her to come back.
What a fun scene to write that was. Maggie as well turned into one of people's favorite characters of mine. People really, really like Maggie because I tend to really like my monsters. Like even in I'll try to keep the spoiler free. There's a certain character in Night Shoot that I really, really enjoyed and I thought was sympathetic, and I think Maggie as well.
Is that character the one in the attic?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was a character again. You knew something kind of weird was going to happen, but you weren't really 100% sure what was going to happen. And then kind of when it does happen, you're kind of like, oh, like, buddy.
Yeah.
You had to do that? Like, yeah.
Yeah. But Maggie, I think, is on a sort of righteous crusade. And if she has to crack a few skulls and rip a few dicks off on the way, you have to censor that, do you?
I'll have to check with the FCC. I believe over here they prefer the term penises.
Penises. I have to rip a few penises off. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that works. Yeah, I just got the approval. And so we'll skip over Navajo because nobody cares about that book.
I don't even remember writing it.
And we had a pretty good chat about it on Staring into the Abyss podcast. So if you want to hear more about us joking around about hating each other's work, check out Richard and Mike and Matt's podcast.
Let me know how it was, because I was so nervous during the entire recording that I have no recollection whatsoever of doing the recording, and also I've not gone back and listened to it because I know that I'm going to be.
I haven't re-listened to it. All I really do remember is the fact that for some reason I couldn't connect. I was trying to connect onto that call, and it was like it kept saying you're connected, and I couldn't hear anything. Yeah, so.
I was just telling them.
That's why I wanted to do this to kind of preview how this whole thing works.
Yeah.
So now that brings us to your most recent one, The Perfect Victim, which has a fantastic cover from Gemma. I mean, again, all of your covers have always been fantastic, and no disrespect to Night Shoot or Maggie's or Dead Girl Blues, or the schmuck who did Navajos. But now we're at Perfect Victim, and that one, it's funny because it's a story that really does feel quite familiar when you read it, but at the same time it's new and fresh and refreshing because it's almost like your classic kidnapping and survival story, but there's a number of nice twists and turns in there. Was there anything that really kind of inspired you to go with that story?
No, that was one of my was that a lockdown? No, that I'd started that book way before lockdown when my wife was away in Borneo. It was just one of those It's probably like with Maggie's Grave, when I'd said to you, "Oh, I've come up with a quick idea. I'm just gonna write this quick novella and put it out," and then with me, things generally expand into novel size. But this one was kind of that quick idea, which was just, what if you kidnapped a young girl thinking it's going to be super easy, but actually it turns out she's pretty tough. And that was just the general idea. It's basically Home Alone, but really violent.
Yeah.
And that was a very quick write, that one. Yeah, yeah. I went 30 minutes without completely losing my train of thought there, but it's happened now. It happened.
It's interesting because, excluding Navajo, all of your books predominantly have a female main character.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Now, is that something that you always start off with, or has that changed in a book where you're like, actually, no, I think, like Forgotten Island, I think, was it Anna was the main character?
Yeah.
Did you start that off as it was, Dave as the main character, and then you thought, no, this would work better, or has it always been, these are my main characters?
No, it's always. I think it started off almost as I love vintage horror. Obviously pulp horror, all the your Sean Hudson's, James Hurwitt's, everything going all the way back through. But the one thing I always found a little bit frustrating and kind of boring about them was their heroes. Like every Graham Masterton novel I've read always seemed to have like a professor or something. He's a sort of kind of stuffy, pipe smoking, they're just kind of dull characters. And so I thought it'd be more interesting to have female characters. And also, I much prefer writing women.
Yeah.
I think because I spend most of my time around women, it's actually probably easier for me in a way.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah. Well, especially because like you do them at least. And I mean, again, this is coming from an old white guy, but I find when I read your stuff, you do them justice, right? Like they're not just, a sexual piece in there to end up in the shower. They're not, a lot like how a lot of the kind of co-main stars of a lot of the slasher movies used to be, right? Where it was, how great of an actress is she when the whole thing is for her to be in the bikini or in the shower or whatever. And, yours are never like that, so it's great.
Yeah, I mean, that was back when I used to read my reviews. The feedback I used to enjoy getting the most was from female identifying reviewers who would say that, he's actually written women really well, which is a big, even more so than like, it's scary or something. That was my favorite, but sort of bit of praise, I guess, to get. And I try and do things like I never really describe their bodies, which is something, all these pulp horror books, again, they always open with that scene where she steps out of the shower and she looks in the mirror and she admires her voluptuous breasts and everything. It's like they're obsessed with describing the women's bodies, which I try not to do unless it's from the point of view of one of the inevitable sleazebag characters that's in my books.
Yeah. And I mean, to a degree, sometimes you need to, right? Like, if, as an example, if they're having to get away from something and they need to crawl through something, you don't want to be 200 pages in when you suddenly say, maybe this person's a little bit larger in some areas and now they're stuck. Because up to then you'd be like, well, this wasn't how I pictured them at all. So sometimes you need to have a bit of
absolutely,
but not the ones where you're, giving their nipples minds of their own, right? So
yes, her nipples cried out for his touch.
I can't see Boris typing that.
My thing is as well, I tend not to describe characters much at all, because my whole sort of ethos when starting out writing was to write the books I wanted to read, and so therefore to cut out all the boring stuff that I don't care about, and that's really bland pages and pages of description of buildings and people, what people look like and what they wear. I find that so uninteresting and it happens so often in books. And it's like Jonathan walked in, he was wearing blue jeans and a button-down sweater, and it's like, I don't care. Again, if it's important in some way, sure, but then it just describes what everyone's wearing. Oh, I just find that's
and that's the common thing in a lot of fantasy books, right? Like look at George R.R. Martin. Like he'll take 3,000-4,000. So he'll take 3,000 or 4,000 words to describe just the food they're eating at dinner.
That's the bit where if I'm reading that, I'm just sort of skimming and I'll skim, and then I'll just start to skip and get to something that's actually happening.
Which then, like, with you doing my editing stuff, I'll get notes from you, and I'm like, oh yeah, he didn't like that part. I will not tell people that he's wearing jeans.
If it's important, if the jeans are to then come alive and attack him, Boris.
See, he likes jeans. Boris likes jeans.
He's looking out the window. Hang on. Here we go again. Buddy.
Yeah, nothing to say here, so I'm just gonna
say hi, Uncle Steve.
I did some random monologue. I'll edit in music there. It'll be, yeah. Well, that's all of your books.
For now.
I'm excited to see what the next one is. Hopefully, we'll get a release date soon for the one on your shelf.
Yeah, I'm thinking before the end of the year. I mean, I could put it out tomorrow. It's completely finished. It's totally edited. I've got a cover by the Connor who did Night Shoot and Dead Girl Blues.
Fantastic cover.
And I'm using a cover that I did myself for the hardback.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I've seen that one too. That's a nice cover. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, well, I don't really have anything else to say, and my lunch is almost over. So I'll probably try to figure out ways to end any of these interviews I ever do. Then, hey, my time's up and get out.
Do you want me to just flip you the bird and storm off?
No, we're not allowed to do that on this show.
Oh, okay.
No hand symbols.
Here, Boris is going to wave.
Bye, Boris.
That was rubbish.
Yeah. Okay.
Catch you later.
Yeah, I think.
Hail Satan.
Oh, jeez. I got to figure out how to edit that out. All right, we'll chat soon. Thanks a lot.
Well, always a pleasure, Steve.
Yeah, we'll chat soon, buddy.